Among all the mysteries that mankind has always tried to explain since we set foot on the world for the first time, the Bermuda Triangle is probably one of the most famous. Made up of 1.5 million square kilometers on the high seas, it takes its name from the equilateral triangle formed by the points of the islands of Bermuda, Puerto Rico, and Miami in Florida. It's also a place where mysterious things seem to take place. From a ghost ship spotted sailing at sea to the disappearance of an entire family, here are 20 things you need to know about the Bermuda Triangle. Number 20. Legend of the Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Triangle. There are lots of words to describe the Bermuda Triangle, but placid certainly isn't one of them. The beginning of this mystery must be marked in the year 1945, when a crew of 5 U.S. Navy planes, which were flying over the area, disappeared without a trace. Not only that, but so did a 6th emergency apparatus that came to the rescue of the top 5. In total, 27 people were never heard from again, and they would forge the beginning of the famous legend. Although, in reality, there had been other disappearances in the area before. According to Charles Berlitz in his book The Bermuda Triangle of 1974, the yacht The Spray in 1909, the SS Timandra in 1917 that was heading to Buenos Aires, or the USS Cyclops in 1918 that traveled from Baltimore to Brazil and whose remains were never found. And these are just some examples. It would be in 1964 when the writer Vincent Gaddis would refer to the place for the first time as the Bermuda Triangle in an article for the magazine Pulp. Although in 1950, journalist Edward Van Winkle Jones had already named the area as the Triangle of the Devil. It probably wouldn't help that the bizarre disappearance of 1945 was followed in a very short time by 2 others, the Star Tiger in February 1948 and the Star Ariel in January 1949. Both planes were owned by British South American Airways, an airline created by veteran pilots of World War II. Since then, attempts have been made to provide a sufficiently coherent explanation for the strange disappearances of ships and planes.
Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button and click the notification bell right now, or this centipede will crawl on your face when you're sleeping.
Now, it's time for the star topic. We all know that some animals from prehistoric times still walk this earth. Pretty much all birds have evolved from dinosaurs. That's the key word here, evolved. What if I told you that a marine biologist claims to have found a real-size, old-school marine dinosaur? What a man discovered in the Bermuda Triangle shocked the whole world. The scientist was diving inside an area of the Bermuda Triangle, trying to find the reason why so many ships disappear there. As a biologist, he had a hunch that the cause may be a gigantic creature defending its territory, and he found a massive prehistoric dinosaur still alive in the deep water. That area being the deepest point of the Atlantic Ocean, a creature of such size could totally hide from any modern technology down there for the entirety of its life. What if there are more like it? Could this be the answer of so many lives lost to the Devil's Triangle? What do you think? Comment down below with the hashtag StarTopic and let us know your opinion in relation to what we just showed on screen. With that said, let's keep things moving. Number 19. William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. It was first performed on November 1st, 1611 at the Palace of Whitehall in London. In the play, Prospero, the legitimate Duke of Milan, has been ousted from his position by his brother and finds himself on a desert island after a ship has been shipwrecked. The play begins with a strong storm unleashed by Ariel at Prospero's command when he guesses that his brother, Antonio, is traveling on a ship near the island where he is. A fundamental factor with which Shakespeare configures the atmosphere of the island is the supernatural. Prospero's magic, based on the tradition of alchemy with which he controls the elements and everything that happens on the island, the tricks and the captivating music from Ariel, references to the witch Sycorax or mother of Caliban, magic is the tool through which Prospero wields his power. The island of the work is often associated with the islands of Bermuda. This is quite likely because in the 17th century, the English ship Sea Venture was shipwrecked in the waters of Bermuda, and the survivors were forced to live on those islands. The similarities that some critics have found between the story of William Strachey, one of the survivors of the shipwreck, and Shakespeare's work have led them to conclude that the former influenced Shakespeare in the description of the shipwreck and the island. Number 18. Strange clouds from above the Bermuda Triangle. Researchers have observed strange hexagonal clouds over the Bermuda Triangle in NASA satellite images, capable, in their opinion, of explaining the disappearances of planes and ships in the area. These clouds range between 32 and 88 kilometers wide and have been discovered approximately 240 kilometers off the coast of Florida, over the Bahama Islands. Steve Miller, a meteorologist specializing in satellite imagery at Colorado State University, said that the straight-edge appearance of the clouds is quite unusual. You don't normally see clouds with straight edges. Most of the time, clouds are random in their distribution. In any case, the researchers don't think it's an unusual phenomenon because the team also examined similar cloud shapes over the North Sea off the UK coast, associated with sea level winds of up to 100 miles per hour, powerful enough to create waves over 14 meters high. These kinds of hexagonal shapes over the ocean are essentially air pumps. They are made up of what are called microbursts, and they generate bursts of air that come down from the bottom of the cloud, then hit the ocean, and then create waves that can sometimes be massive in size and start to interact with each other. Number 17. Magnetic forces causing compass malfunctions. The Bermuda Triangle is one of only 2 places on Earth where a compass points to true north instead of magnetic north. Let me explain. While true north is the fixed point where the lines of longitude converge on a map, magnetic north is constantly changing. It's the point on the Earth's surface where its magnetic field points straight down. The difference between the two is called declination, and all trained aircraft and ship pilots know how to take it into account when plotting their course. Magnetism has played tricks on us in the past. Even Christopher Columbus wrote about bizarre compass bearings in the area. Natural variations in magnetic declination, the difference between the North Magnetic Pole and geographic north, could also have played a role in the many disappearances in the first half of the 20th century. At that time, the triangle was crossed by an agonic line, a region where the magnetic and geographic north poles coincide and which can lead to errors in compass navigation. This imaginary agonic line is slowly moving westward, causing magnetic declination. Number 16. Methane bubbles. Ships float because they're not solid, so the set of steel and the air it contains is less dense than water. However, if suddenly a large amount of gas mixes with the water, the density of this mixture is lower than that of the ship, and the ship sinks. And as it turns out, there's a lot of gas in the Devil's Triangle. 2 experts have discovered significant amounts of methane hydrates on the seabed and ancient eruption sites that generate huge methane bubbles that grow geometrically as they gain height. Methane, which is normally frozen under great pressure as underground gas hydrates embedded into rocks, can become dislodged and transform into geometrically expanding gas bubbles, which burst upwards. When these bubbles reach the surface of the water and rise into the air, they continue to expand upwards and outwards. Any ship caught in the methane megabubble immediately loses all floating capacities and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. If the bubbles are large enough and have a high enough density, they can also pull aircraft with little or no chance of warning them in advance. The aircraft victims of these methane bubbles will lose their engines or perhaps ignite with the methane that surrounds them. They plummet towards the ocean and then to the bottom of the sea. Number 15. Aliens. World-famous treasure hunter Daryl Miklos delved into the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle and found a truly strange object. Speculation was quick to start, and they even believe that it may be an alien ship. Miklos reportedly took secret maps from a former NASA astronaut named Gordon Cooper, who died in 2004, to exploit the Bermuda Triangle. The explorer managed to localize several sunken ships, although the shape of his latest discovery has him completely puzzled. Cooper had indicated the area of the find with the phrase unidentified object instead of shipwreck, and when Miklos arrived at the site in his mini-submarine, he came across a strange object that was considered an unidentified submerged object, or a USO. It is a gigantic structure covered with corals. There are horizontal cylinder structures that also stand out. The geophysicists on the team report that the coral covering these structures appears to be more than 5,000 years old. This new discovery is fueling the enthusiasm of UFO chasers all over the world, who have been saying for years that the Devil's Triangle is a landing area for extraterrestrial aircrafts. Some even believe that the triangle is a portal to another dimension from where strange beings can come and go as they please. Number 14. Wormhole. First of all, what is a wormhole exactly? In physics, a wormhole, also known as an Einstein-Rosen bridge, is a theoretical and topological feature of spacetime described in the equations of general relativity that essentially consists of a shortcut through space and time. A wormhole has at least two ends connected to a single throat through which matter could travel. To date, no evidence has been found that known spacetime contains such structures, so it's currently only a theoretical possibility in science. In theory, when a red supergiant star explodes, it throws matter out, so it ends up being smaller and becomes a neutron star. But it can also happen that it's compressed so much that it absorbs its own energy inside and disappears, leaving a black hole in the place it occupied. The hypothesis suggests that on one side, there's a black hole that absorbs matter, but on the other side, there would be a white hole that expels everything the black hole swallows. Wormholes sure hold a lot of appeal for science fiction enthusiasts, and some people firmly believe that the Bermuda Triangle is one of the extremities of one mysterious wormhole. Imagine the endless possibilities. That could mean that all the ships, planes, and their passengers are still out there in a different dimension, and maybe even still alive. Number 13. Bermuda Triangle Rogue Wave. Sailors have told stories of monstrous waves lashing their ships for centuries. Large and threatening masses of water that suddenly appear out of nowhere and rise above their heads and the hulls of their boats, ready to engulf everything in their path. Given the lack of evidence and the enormous sizes that were described, these stories were assumed to be myth. Waves of 30 meters, like the ones featured in these stories, were believed to only form once every several thousand years. But it seems that they were no fable. They exist, they are quite frequent, and they can also explain some of the disappearances occurring in the mythical Bermuda Triangle, according to British oceanographers from the University of Southampton after an investigation that has lasted decades. The explanation for the sudden disappearance of boats and planes in the so-called Devil's Triangle can be found in the favorable conditions that exist there for the generation of giant waves. There are storms to the south and north that come together. The scientists have measured waves of up to 30 meters. The bigger the ship, the worse the damage caused. Whether or not this hypothesis is an explanation for the so-called Bermuda Triangle, the truth is, the United States Coast Guard does not recognize the existence of a particular danger for ships and planes in the famous area, nor does it recognize extraordinary factors. Number 12. Water spouts. Water spouts are a kind of tornado that occurs over water. They spin columns of moist and rising air that typically form over relatively warmer waters. Water spouts can be just as dangerous as ordinary tornadoes and can have wind speeds of over 120 miles per hour. Some water spouts form away from storms and even during relatively good weather. These water tornadoes can be relatively transparent and initially visible only because of an unusual pattern that they create in the water. Water spouts are not officially recorded as tornadoes unless the rotating air funnel makes landfall. They are smaller and weaker than tornadoes, but by all means not harmless whatsoever. During this phenomenon, water from the ocean is sucked hundreds of thousands of feet into the air. The Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida is arguably the world's most active area for water spouts, with hundreds forming each year. So much so that some people speculate that water spouts are responsible for some of the losses recorded in the Bermuda Triangle. Number 11. Human errors. The kickoff of the Devil's Triangle myth took place on December 5, 1945, 3 months after peace was declared and World War II ended. Although the war had ended, the United States air crews located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, continued to carry out military exercises. That day, at 14:10, a patrol composed of 5 Grumman TBF Avengers, led by Charles Taylor, set out with the mission of dropping their bombs on a reef that served as a practice range. Although they were tough and sturdy aircrafts capable of sinking almost any enemy ship and submarine, the navigation technology they had was from the 1940s, and they still used the dread reckoning method, which used basic technology with which pilots could estimate the aircraft's current position. And you guessed it, it was significantly more prone to human error than modern-day technology. It's believed that Taylor led the men to the Florida Keys, a chain of small islands that stretches 200 kilometers south of the peninsula. Most likely, the crew had decided to take a shortcut during the mission to get back to the fort sooner, but they miscalculated mid-flight. According to the reading obtained by a radar on the ground, what they had flown over was Grand Bahama Island and not the Keys. Ultimately, the 5 Avengers were in the Atlantic Ocean and east of the Florida coast when the squad leader believed they were southwest of the Fort Lauderdale base. Number 10. Flying fish in the Bermuda Triangle. This curious aquatic vertebrate called the flying fish, or Chilopogon excelians, has a slender and elongated body, cylindrical at the front and narrower and flatter at the sides, covered almost entirely with large scales. The maximum recorded length of this flying fish is 30 centimeters, but the overall average length is 18 centimeters. It has a dorsal and anal fin without spines, and with the presence of soft rays, 2 pelvic fins and 2 pectoral fins, the latter being used to glide in the air after jumping out of the water. Its eyes are noticeably flattened. The mouth is small with relatively prominent teeth. The color of the flying fish is a grayish platinum with greenish and blue tones on its body. The pectoral fins are slightly translucent, and it has more intense and varied color in these fins than in the dorsal and anal fins. The flying fish is found mostly in the Atlantic Ocean, centered mainly in the tropical part and part of the central zone. Specifically, it can be found in South America, Central America, and part of North America, in countries such as Brazil, Costa Rica, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Bermuda, and part of the state of Florida in the United States. Number 9. Atlantis was swallowed up by the Bermuda Triangle. The legend of Atlantis is universal. It was cited for the first time in the texts of Plato, dating back to about 330 years BC, and all the peoples of the world accept the existence of this admirable continent whose culture was left written in confused stories by Homer and the great historians of antiquity. The Atlantic Ocean connects with Atlantis. It is said that this monumental sunken continent existed there forever. Atl, which means water in the Nahuatl language, also coincides with that fabulous name Atl Atlantis, and it's believed that its root came from there. And now, Canadian scientists have discovered what could be the missing city of Atlantis. The team, led by Paul Weinsweig and Pauline Zalitsky, have discovered the ruins of an ancient underwater city in the area of the enigmatic Bermuda Triangle. Specifically, they've discovered pyramids and immense architectural constructions that are hidden at the bottom of the sea under white sand dragged by the tides. The complex belongs to a pre-classical period in the history of Central America, populated by an advanced civilization similar to the early Teotihuacan culture. The mythical city of Atlantis supposedly housed an immense number of treasures. That's why, for hundreds of years, finding this missing city has been the goal of many explorers and scientists. Number 8. What happened to the USS Cyclops? The USS Cyclops AC-4 was a Proteus-class military supply ship belonging to the United States Navy, whose fame is due to it being listed in the unexplained disappearances of the so-called Bermuda Triangle. The USS Cyclops sailed on February 8, 1918, from Norfolk to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with a cargo of sea mines and coal. It sailed from that port on February 16th and made a stopover in Salvador de Bahia on the 20th of that month, transporting 306 crew members and 10,000 tons of manganese ore. Upon setting sail, Captain George W. Worley reported a crack in the cylinder of the turbine to the starboard side of the ship, which left it operating with a single propeller, which made it advisable to return the ship for repairs. On March 3rd, it made an unscheduled stopover in Barbados, and Worley reported to the U.S. consul that the USS Cyclops' float level was above the mark, indicating overload. It was authorized to sail to Baltimore, leaving the port on March 4th, but not before having been loaded with drinking water and coal. On March 9th, it was sighted between Cape Hatteras and Cape Charles off the coast of Virginia by the SS Amalco, a tanker ship. The USS Cyclops and her crew were never heard from again. No wrecks or signs of the ship were found. Two sister ships to the Cyclops, the Proteus and Nereus, disappeared in the same area years later. Number 7. The deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, deep in Milwaukee, is in the Bermuda Triangle. The Milwaukee Deep is part of the Puerto Rico Trench. Together with the surrounding area known as the Brownson Deep, the Milwaukee Deep forms an elongated depression that makes up the floor of the trench. As there is no geomorphological distinction between the two, it has been proposed that the use of both names be revised to refer to different areas. The floor of the Puerto Rico Trench constitutes the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean. During the Five Deeps expedition, explorer Victor Vescovo achieved the first manned descent to this location. The Puerto Rico Trench has a maximum depth of no more than 27,480 feet, measured directly by Vescovo during his 2018 descent to the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean. It is only 76 miles north of the coast of Puerto Rico at Punto Palmas Altas in Manatee. One of the first soundings of the area was obtained on June 12, 1852 by Lieutenant S.P. Lee of the U.S. Navy. In 1964, the French submersible Archimedes explored the Puerto Rico Trench to a depth of approximately 27,200 feet, but did not reach its deepest point. The Milwaukee Depth is named after the first ship that sounded it. The bottom of it is covered with mud, sand, rocks, and shells. Do you think that this fact is connected with all the mysterious disappearances that have occurred in that same area? Could there be a connection? What do you think? Number 6. Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is a warm and fast ocean current in the Atlantic Ocean that originates in the Gulf of Mexico. It extends to the vicinity of the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula and follows the eastern coasts of the United States and Newfoundland before crossing the Atlantic Ocean as the North Atlantic Current. It is a superficial current due to the warm temperature of its waters, and it gradually decreases in depth and speed until it practically disappears at about 100 meters, a level where the influence of heating by the sun's rays disappears in practice. It has a width of more than 1,000 kilometers for much of its trajectory, which gives a rough idea of the enormous amount of energy it carries and the beneficial consequences of it. Its flow is enormous, about 80 million cubic meters per second. It's caused by the combined action of the terrestrial rotation movement and the configuration of both the American and European coasts. Since the first voyage of Columbus, the Spanish found it difficult to navigate west to a latitude higher than the Tropic of Cancer, a course that caused them to considerably delay their journey. In fact, in the 4 voyages that Columbus made, the first was the only one that followed this course. Number 5. SS Cotopaxi. In 2015, surprising news began to circulate on various websites. The Cuban Coast Guard Service had come to intercept a mysterious boat that was heading towards Havana and that didn't respond to any of the radio warnings from the Maritime Authority. When the Cuban sailors established visual contact with the ship, they found that it didn't have any crew. The ship was searched by Cuban naval officers who found the captain's logbook, although it didn't contain any information on the circumstances of the crew's abandonment. After a few hours of uncertainty, the information tracking managed to determine that it was the cargo ship SS Cotopaxi, which had disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle 90 years ago along with its entire crew, which included 23 sailors and her captain. To the disappointment of many, it was later shown that there had never been reports from the Cuban Coast Guard regarding a find of this magnitude. Despite the fact that the surprising appearance of the SS Cotopaxi proved to be totally false, it's worth remembering the story of a ship whose whereabouts are still a mystery. The SS Cotopaxi, which carried several tons of coal in her holds, disappeared in 1925 when she was en route from Charleston, South Carolina to Havana. The ship had sailed on November 29th of that year, and on December 1st, when she was supposedly crossing the mythical area of the Bermuda Triangle, she sent out a distress call announcing that she was sinking beyond the possibility of salvation. Her remains and those of her passengers were never found, and 30 days later, she was placed in the category of disappeared. With the passage of time, a sad conclusion was reached. Her 77-meter length had been lost forever in the ocean's waters. Number 4. The Legend of the Ghost Ship. Carol A. Deering was a 5-masted commercial schooner that was found aground off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina in 1921 with the crew nowhere to be found. The Deering is one of the most widely written maritime mysteries in history, with claims that she was a victim of the Bermuda Triangle, although evidence points to mutiny or possible piracy. On January 31, 1921, surfer C.P. Brady sighted the Deering at dawn, who was on watch at the Coast Guard station at Cape Hatteras. The ship was aground with all sails set on the outer edge of Diamond Shoals. Extending offshore from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, these sandbars have been notorious as a common shipwreck site for centuries and are known as the graveyard of the Atlantic. Rescue boats were unable to approach the ship due to bad weather. The ship wasn't boarded until February 4th after being battered by the swell for several days, and it became clear that the schooner had been completely abandoned. Her steering gear was found to be damaged, with the steering wheel broken, the binnacle on, and the rudder disconnected from her stock. The ship's log and navigation equipment were missing, along with the crew's personal effects and the ship's 2 lifeboats. In the ship's kitchen, it appeared that certain foods were being prepared for the next day's meal at the time of abandonment. The Coast Guard cutter Manning attempted to salvage the Deering, but this was found to be impossible. Number 3. Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste was a trading ship built in Perthborough, Nova Scotia in 1861. The ship was intended to transport alcohol from the United States to Europe, commanded by Captain Benjamin Briggs. The last record found of the captain's diary on land was from November 3, 1872. Prior to his departure, the commander wrote a letter to his mother in which he told her that they would leave for Genoa that Tuesday and assured her that our ship is in beautiful condition and I hope we have a good passage. As planned, on November 7th, the ship left New York Harbor for Genoa with Briggs, his wife Sarah, and daughter Sophia, and 7 sailors in her crew. The Celeste went through terrible weather conditions, powerful storms, strong winds, and rough seas for 2 weeks. After 15 days of constant whipping, 1 or more pages of Briggs' diary dated November 25th was rescued. In this text, the captain mentioned that the ship didn't present any damage up to that moment. After that date, nothing more was known about the ship or the crew. On December 5th, a Canadian ship called the De Gracia was on an island near New Jersey awaiting a shipment of oil, also bound for Genoa. Halfway along the trip, between the Azores and the coast of Portugal, they spotted a ghost ship drifting in the distance, sinking a few kilometers away. The boat's captain, David Morehouse, and his first officer, Oliver DeVoe, confirmed that it was the Mary Celeste, but noted that she was empty. Although the crew members weren't there, their belongings were still lying in the cabins. Number 2. Ellen Austin. On December 20th, 1880, a 3-masted schooner named Ellen Austin left London for New York. It was a large ship, 210 feet long and almost 2 tons in weight. At the head of the schooner was Captain Baker, who had come to command the boat after it had been the subject of several controversial episodes that had not left the previous managers in a very good place. So the Ellen Austin was, so to speak, a popular figure, though not precisely because of a favorable image. A few weeks after leaving London, in an area slightly north of the Sargasso Sea, the Ellen Austin sees another schooner, also with 3 masts, following an erratic course. It's impossible to identify the ship because her name appears to have been scratched from her hull. Baker decides to change course to get closer and tries to signal to communicate. Nothing. Up to 2 days go by with no response. That mysterious boat seems to be abandoned in the middle of the ocean, so Baker doesn't think twice and decides to approach her. Despite the screams of the sailors of the Ellen Austin, no one answers from the mysterious schooner. Stranger still, the ship appears to be in perfect condition, with all its furnishings in order and the cargo, fine wood, mostly mahogany and cedar, intact. There were no leaks or damage to the hull, and only her nameplate had been ripped off. Of course, no personal belongings or navigation instruments were found, and the appearance of the complex had been abandoned for quite some time. Number 1. Witchcraft. On the night of December 22, 1967, the owner of the Witchcraft cruise ship, Dan Barak, sailed from Miami with his friend Patrick Horgan in order to take a short night walk to admire the Florida coast. Around 9 p.m., when the ship was only 2 kilometers from the point where they had set sail, the Coast Guard received a strange distress call where Barak stated that they had collided with something that was underwater and that it had damaged his ship's propellers. The United States Coast Guard immediately dispatched a rescue team that took less than 15 minutes to reach the point from where Barak had made the distress call. However, the place was completely empty and without any trace of the Witchcraft or its 2 passengers. Despite the fact that they spent more than 2 weeks of intense search, traveling more than 400 kilometers to the ocean sea and searching the entire coast of Florida, the Witchcraft disappeared forever, leaving an unsolved mystery behind that no one's been able to solve so far. The best mysteries are those that may never be solved. What do you think? Do you believe something strange is going on at the so-called Bermuda Triangle? Or do you believe that it's all a coincidence? Tell us about it. Also, check out our other cool stuff showing up on screen right now. See you next time.